The Human Optimization Podcast is proudly brought to you by Vicon Supplements, where quality meets sustainability. Vicon's all-natural supplements are handcrafted and sustainably produced in Canada, bringing you products that nourish both your well-being and our planet. Visit viconsupplements.com today and be a part of a greener, healthier future.
Are you ready to embark on a journey to the best version of you? Join me, Lisa Pitel-Killah, as I dive deep into the world of hair tissue mineral analysis and functional medicine with fellow experts, and guide you on the path of unlocking your full potential. As a multi-time kettlebell sport world champion, I'm on a mission to reach high-performance professionals from around the world to help you minimize tiring symptoms, maximize health, and gain unstoppable energy. This is the Human Optimization Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. I have Dr. Dr.Vrzal here with me, otherwise known as Dr. V. Driven by constant debilitating headaches in his youth, was cured by a chiropractor. He pursued a career in the same discipline inspired by that change. Initially misdiagnosed and advised to consult a psychiatrist due to the pain, if you can believe that.
Okay.
He embarked on a mission to understand headaches' root causes, and we're going to talk about some of those today. With over 30 years of expertise, Dr. V refines pain patterns, advocates drug-free and holistic solutions, and shares his methods to a healthier lifestyle. His thriving practice reflects a personal commitment to health, performance, and relieving patients' pain. Welcome to the show.
Super excited to be here. Let's get the word out.
Yeah, I know. Well, and you've got so many amazing things coming. You've got a book coming this year.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that today. And we're going to dive into, tell people about you. There's always a reason and a journey of why we're here today. Tell us about that. Give us some background.
Right. Well, and you mentioned a little bit of it. I was young. I was a natural bodybuilder at the time, drug tested. My wife and I were Mr. and Miss Natural California in the 90s. So started into that whole arena. I was diagnosed as hypoglycemic, though, as my typical class clown and getting into trouble. And so I was diagnosed hypoglycemic, and then realized that every time I ate my typical donut, I'd be a punk and get into trouble. So at 14, I quit eating sugar, and that really started my whole health journey. By that point, I'd been working out a couple hours a day and trying to take control of what I was eating. Still, I wish I could model this discipline for everybody else. What makes a 14-year-old say, sugar's the devil and throw it out altogether.
Yeah.
Never turned back on that. And then, as you mentioned, I started getting really bad headaches. For me, it really would start coming on whenever I do bench press. And so I tried the aspirin, Advil, Tylenol, the normal stuff, and to no avail. And so I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to push through it. And the more I push through it, the longer the headaches would last. Ultimately, they were lasting 2 or 3 days after any chest workout or that sort of thing. And so my folks lovingly, took me to a GP, general practitioner. It said, you might have an aneurysm. Oh no, right?
Oh my goodness.
Right. And so, we did the CAT scan with the dyes and, all of that. And that's when I got that great diagnosis of, well, you don't have an aneurysm, so go see a psychiatrist, and so that really kind of started my journey of looking at what else is out there. I had no experience with, natural health practitioners at that point. And so once I got through chiropractic school and did get my first chiropractic experience in there, which just felt like the whole world came off of my shoulders. That was nice. I was talking about driving my little yellow Volkswagen Bug home, that day, just like, ooh, this is wonderful. How can I do this for everybody else, right?
Yep.
And so I started into that journey and got registered for chiropractic school at that point, and continued on with the bodybuilding journey. Then from a fitness perspective, during chiro school, they told us people are either good anaerobic athletes or anaerobic athletes. And so by that point, I'd proven myself, at least in my mind, as Mr. Natural California, and that's drug tested. So I decided to take up bike racing and show that I could be effective in an aerobic sport as well. And got pretty obsessed about that and got into bike racing. My niche at this point is the 3 to 8 hour mountain bike races. Do those on a pretty regular basis.
Yep.
I train on the bike a lot, and that's my training, my testing zone, if you will, training nutrients and changes in my life to see how my power, my performance is affected. I just did a bike ride this morning, and yesterday, anyway, yesterday I did a bike ride that I normally, one of my more specific training rides, and I did it in the afternoon where I typically do it in the morning, and my power was at an average of 10 to 15 watts higher for my hill climbs. So kind of got my brain thinking, okay, how am I going to manage cortisol, and how does this all play out? So that's the kind of rabbit trails that I go down every day of my life.
Amazing. Well, and what a change to go from, bodybuilding to cycling. That's a pretty huge change, right? Yeah, that's incredible. And so with regards to, I want to kind of dive into, because I found it really interesting, was some of the connections and the patterns with regards to kind of headaches, identifying and categorizing them. Because I think sometimes, everybody's pain threshold is different. I guess that's one part that we have to consider. But everybody's pain that they're getting is different as well. And so tell me about the patterns that you've identified with regards to headaches and migraines.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. So as soon as I got into healthcare and had the tools to start figuring out what the causes of problems were, a lot of that comes through Dr. Goodhart's applied kinesiology. So immediately I started, okay, where's your head hurt? And so I'd use these tools and pain patterns and things to identify what the triggers were for those patterns. Eventually that whittled down to 7 specific patterns that I ultimately realized the headaches I was experiencing back in my late teens was a whole head pattern. That was a colon issue that I had. And that's why I got an adjustment C2, and that changed my world, because C2 tends to go out, much like muscles have organ associations with them. Each vertebral level has organ associations with them. So he adjusted C2 and probably L4, and poof, my world was changed. So, the whole headband type pattern is one of the types of headaches. Right-sided headaches tends to be a gallbladder issue. Left-sided headaches tends to be a stomach issue. Temporal headaches, bitemporal headaches tends to be hormone concerns. And then one we could probably talk about a little bit more today would be the suboccipital, or what everybody else calls tension headaches. Those tend to come about when the thyroid's not functioning properly. And so the thyroid activates enzymes. That's part of how it regulates metabolism. And so if the thyroid's not functioning properly, it doesn't stimulate enzyme production, which causes a weakness of both sides of the neck extensors. And so then that sets up that suboccipital, that tension headache. So that's probably the third most common headache. But as from an optimization performance perspective, we certainly want that thyroid functioning well, because thyroid is huge for mental state, for weight management, metabolism, even mental processing. So
100%. And interesting too. So you say that's number 3. What would be number 2 if for that?
Number 1 is right-sided gallbladder headaches, and what I would call gallbladder headaches. And then number 2 would be stomach. Yeah, stomach is left-sided headaches.
Yeah. So right gallbladder, left stomach, and then the tension headache is thyroid.
Yeah. Yes.
Interesting. Because I think that identifying that, it's amazing that you've made those attachments, because of the fact that now people can sit back, and hopefully some of you watching or listening are having an aha moment if you are suffering with headaches, going, oh my gosh, how has no one ever identified this for me before?
Right.
This is incredible.
Why I took on the book project, because I did all the research trying to find if anybody else, and a lot of it comes from acupuncture. So I would have thought that some of the acupuncturists would have been promoting this or putting it out, but it's not. We did all the research for the book, and there's nothing. You search the web for right-sided headache, and it'll tell you to take Advil. It's
so hard on the liver and things like that, right? When you're doing, it's too much, and sometimes it just doesn't work. Right.
As was my case.
Sometimes it just doesn't work. And so to kind of just prime you for talking about the book's title, everybody, again, coming in kind of mid 2024, is The Headache Advantage.
Yes.
Right? And so going down, so you've done the research for the book, you've identified these patterns and what their associations are. Let's talk about typical triggers. Like, what are some of the triggers that will outside of that, like we talked about colon, pituitary, thyroid, stomach, gallbladder. What are some of the things that you've experienced that are triggers that can kind of cause those to happen?
Right. And so backing up a slight bit, the thing that gives me the utmost confidence in these patterns is that I often, in the book, I repeatedly state that headache never leaves my office. So treating thousands and thousands, literally tens of thousands of headaches, and maybe a handful have not left completely resolved. Wow. So that just gives me that confidence, like, wow, this is legit, and this is really the triggers, and I was doing a podcast with the neurologist the other day, and and it's hard for her because she's looking at all the neurologic pathways, and I've studied those too, but I get the bigger results in this case with acupuncture understanding, and that correlates with the organs so well. And so with that, I looked at the suboccipital tension headaches being a thyroid thing. Interestingly, the protein in wheat, whole wheat, is identical. That amino acid structure is identical to the thyroid. And so a person can be eating wheat, and especially if there's leaky gut conundrum, leaky gut issues associated with that, then that leaks through into the bloodstream, triggers the immune system. They call it molecular mimicry, and that starts that whole autoimmune cascade that eventually could be Hashimoto's or any of those. But that cascade, that autoimmune attack against the thyroid, causes a weakness of the neck extensors. Ultimately, when those are not functioning right, then that also causes a weakness of the bilateral glute max muscles. So your kettlebell, people are they're going to have that. When you have bilateral glute max weakness, that puts that multiplies exponentially the pressure on that L5 disc. So then it could be the person having disc problems, for example. They've got that low back pain. They can't do their bent rows or, any of that, low back strengthening exercises because of that weakness in the disc. And ultimately, we get the area functioning properly, get the glutes firing properly, then that disc even can heal, which is going to be a big wow to a lot of people. But over time, as that disc functions, that L5 disc, that pain can go away. Corn is a nutrient that if I were to splurge on corn, I wake up feeling like an old man. I do that, what I call the evolutionary walk, get up bent over it. Right.
Okay. I feel my age today. What's happening? Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that tends to cause almost a cortisol release. So it's almost like in an intense physical workout. Yeah. And so, my favorite example of this was years ago, I did what took me at the time 8-hour bike ride to go right up to Arrowhead for a retreat. And I rode my bike 8 hours that day up the mountain, 5,000 feet of climbing at mile of 100. And it was a retreat. And so they had corn. It was Mexican food when we got there. So it was corn tortillas, it was corn in the rice, it was a corn surprise, basically. Yep. And I woke up just feeling beat. The next year, did the same ride, got there an hour faster, went out to dinner. And for me, lamb is a superfood. So I went out, I had lamb for dinner that night, woke up feeling young and good to go. So that's food. That's one aspect of the thyroid. We can continue on if you'd like.
Well, I do want to continue because I think this is super important, because I think that so many people forget what feeling good is.
For sure.
And it's because of their diet, right? The more you consume, even breaking it down to simple things like gluten and dairy and things like this that kind of cause inflammation and the very general kind of state of that, you eventually, the feeling of 100% feels that at 70, right? It's like you've been at 70% for so long, that's your new 100, right? You don't remember what 100 feels like anymore. And I think that's where kind of that wellness scale starts to deplete, right? And so let's talk about more triggers, because I think this is really important for people to know, because if they are suffering from any of these issues, it could be something they're eating. And a lot of times we don't think about that.
Right. It always is. I was on a podcast with a group of athletes a few weeks ago, and one of the guys says, it's just my age, right? And I was like, it's not.
Never.
Right. Never. You don't have to have that pain. I get neck pain if I eat the wrong carbohydrate, and it's almost a direct. By the time I finish eating, it's like, ooh, I feel like I need an adjustment. And that's it. So that's why the book is called The Headache Advantage, right? For me, the location of the head pain tells me where the primary weakness is for that person. So they might have a list of 15 different symptoms, and if they have right-sided headaches, I'm starting with gallbladder, because more than likely, correcting whatever the lifestyle issue is for the gallbladder in that case, the rest of that stuff's going to go away. Or if they've got suboccipital tension headaches and they've got all these other symptoms, hair loss or weight gain, depression, crying, then I'm like, slam dunk. We're fixing your thyroid, and most of the other stuff, the lion's share of the other problems are going to go away. So pain is absolutely our indicator. Pain motivates, right? Most of us are motivated to, it hurts when I, do X, or when I talk to, person Y, and then we need to, we're wired to avoid that. So understanding what those triggers are helps us make better choices in life so that we can age gracefully and thrive in this thing called life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree 100%. And what would some of the other, are there other triggers that people, like, even just rather than, just lifestyle stuff that they might be doing that would kind of trigger some of these things as well that people
for sure.
About?
Yeah. So anytime there's a weakness or an area of pain, it's always structurally induced. And even that typically is one of the other two. Now we can talk about that, but it's structurally induced, nutritionally induced by eating the wrong things, supplemental deficiency. You talk a lot about that in your other podcasts, or emotional. So there's ways that the body physically stores emotions. Thyroid, for example, has emotions like muddled instability and frightfully overjoyed that, it could be. I had a patient years ago, had a thyroid issue ever since her husband won a boat race, of all things, and she was frightfully overjoyed for how her husband finally won his life dream, and and that was enough to tweak her thyroid, so that's how the body works. In my Instagram at Dr.Vrzal Instagram, I showed a way to kind of erase some of these physical manifestations of emotions. In the book, I talk about that as well. It doesn't have to be super complicated. The main thing is identifying, recognizing, oops, I've had all these problems ever since mom died, or ever since I had this court issue, or whatever the problem is,
Yeah, I agree that awareness is the key.
Right.
And people forget that we're just energy.
Right.
And so when we feel things, it can affect other things, even though in our mind they're physical, right?
Yes.
And that's an important part. And so going back though, muscle, structural.
Yes.
One of the biggest things I learned in anatomy training I did years ago with yoga and things like that was that we have a symptom. My back hurt, my low back's tight, and I feel like I've seen enough tight low backs to say, no, it's actually your glutes.
Yes.
We have the symptom of the pain and where it is, but then that's not usually what's causing it, right?
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's another misconception that people really, it's like, oh, my low back, I need to stretch it out, but they stretch out their low back, it really doesn't feel any better.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
So literally every organ, every muscle has an associated gland or organ with it. So that's what gives me that window to identify where the problem is, and ultimately what help me identify the headache patterns. So in your low back example, I mean, one of the more common things of low back pain is that quadratus lumborum muscle, the muscle that attaches from the iliac crest, the bottom of the pelvis to the bottom of the ribs, top of the pelvis to the bottom of the ribs. That muscle spasms when the colon's unhappy. So if somebody eats something that blows their gut biota, the good bacteria in their gut, or causes spasms, like I find a lot of value in blood type understandings as well. So in that case, if an A blood type eats beef, for example, that's going to pretty much guaranteed to cause an intestinal spasm. And so that's going to set up low back pain. I talked about my experience with corn. In the earlier days, if I'd eat splurge on pizza or something, I could tell if there was corn in the crust by how I felt the next morning. I felt achy and old, and I don't like to feel achy and old. So every muscle has an associated gland or organ. So then from there, we look at structural triggers, dietary triggers, emotional triggers, or supplemental needs for whatever that area might be. So like in the low back example, we were talking about thyroid causing a weakness of the glutes. Might be that we need to give them a supplement to heal the thyroid, or vitamin B1, thiamine helps the thyroid activate and make its hormones. So it could be a, thiamine, or it could be a folic acid need. That's part of where the fun clinical experience, and I did my best to try to lay that out in the Headache Advantage to help people with flowcharts, help individuals figure it out themselves. Because there's only one of me. There's only so much I can do in a day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point where you need to clone yourself.
Yeah, try it.
You haven't figured out you haven't researched that process yet, right?
I've trained lots, 30 interns, and trying to do it that way as best I can.
That's all you can do. Yeah, that's amazing, though. And so with all the cases that you've dealt with, what was the toughest case? What was the toughest one that you had to overcome? I was like, that's not quite, because there's always a tough one where it's just
right,
and you had to dig deep to get to the base of it.
Right.
What would that be for you?
Yeah, I mean, a fun thyroid example was, and I mean, fortunately, I've been blessed with the tools to figure stuff out, and so the tough stuff mostly is what walks into my office. And I end up by default specializing in the chronic illness because I tend to be about 2 months out. So people, it's something they've been dealing with for a while, but by the time they get to me, this Jane was coming in. She'd had all the typical thyroid, weight loss and hair weight gain, hair loss, low back pain, blue mood, all the typical low thyroid issues, even the crying to go along with it. And we got her treated. I use this story when I teach a 12-hour thyroid seminar to docs, and one of the concluding statements, our stories is this gal, I throw up her labs and how her labs were all over the place. And then in her case, her thyroid medication was actually causing an autoimmune attack on her thyroid. So we got her off of that. We put her on a good whole food source of thiamine, a product there, and then one other supplement for her thyroid. And all her labs were normalized. She lost weight, and hair was, coming back, and she was feeling great. She wrote me a great testimony of that, and we go over that. And then the mic drop part of that statement was, and her thyroid was removed 25 years prior.
Wow.
So we had her completely normalized, labs all normalized, with no thyroid medication. So that's just kind of helps shine a light on the the potential that the body can heal itself with given the right tools, to be healthy. So it's a fun thing.
Wow, that's an amazing case for sure.
Wow.
Well, and I'm sure you have many more to share. And so with regards to people kind of suffering from chronic headaches, what's one of the first things that you look at?
Yeah, it starts with the location, so for each location, it's a different scenario. I had a gal yesterday, came from Hungary of all places, and had her right side of headaches were getting worse and worse. She'd been dealing with them for over 20 years. They've gotten to where they're pretty much daily. Yeah. And as crazy as it is, her main trigger was tomatoes of all things. So in this case, again, it was a right side headache. She was an A blood type. For A blood types and B blood types, tomatoes inhibit the brain's control of the gallbladder, and they'll set up anxiety and high blood pressure and cholesterol, short-term memory loss, if you will, or recall issues, because of the acetylcholine gets compromised there. And that's part of what raises the blood pressure, because that's a precursor to nitric oxide, for example. Yep. So the main thing I recommended to her was cut the tomatoes altogether. And her son had brought her in and already had kind of prepped her on that. So we jumped right in, and I was able to demonstrate physically how that was affecting her intestinal health and her gallbladder, which again was related to the right side of headaches. We also put her on a homeopathic to help with the emotional stuff, because she'd had some family drama in those years that had escalated her headaches. So we took care of that aspect of it. But, while she was laying on the table, I'm like, how's your head? Yeah, it's great. But it's normally good laying down. Stood her up, walking her out, and her smile just got progressively bigger and bigger and bigger through the exit, as she's like realizing, wow,
headaches.
Kind of like you were referring to earlier, she's realizing this is what life could be like, without a head pain.
Because I feel like people experience things and they're so chronic that they don't really know what it feels like to not feel that way. Right?
Yeah. Don't know any different.
Yeah, super sad.
It is.
And for them to know, like, there is something you can do. There
Yes.
is something that you can do, that you can be able to solve these things. I'm really interested. You've mentioned a couple times now, and in that specific example about the blood type. Can you give some little tidbits on just some of the things that you notice with the different blood types?
Sure.
You kind of mentioned the beef and the A, and then the A and the B and the tomatoes. I'm curious about that. Is this going back to, like, I was thinking of the book, The Blood Type Diet, back from the 80s or 90s year, right? It's old school, back in the 80s, 90s, something like that. Is that kind of what that comes from?
Yes. And so when they first identified blood type, they identified on blood cells. Unfortunately, it's called blood type. Really what it should be is immune type. So ultimately what it comes down to is lectins and what your immune system recognizes as self. And so, I'm the son of a skeptic, and, I'd done every, popular diet at the time. I said, honey, we need to be vegetarians because that's the healthy thing to do. And she thrived as an A blood type. I was, again, a bodybuilder, and I got sick every time we tried to do vegetarianism. And then I discovered the blood type. I realized that's why she does better on these foods, and I do better on the, the more paleo type of a diet. And so kind of made that, and then I tried to, like, okay, but it's just tomatoes. And then I realized I can't stay awake in church if I eat tomatoes. I have an insulin crash. Or if I eat chicken, I'm out. I'm ADD. I'm done. So those are, for me as a B blood type, those are foods that compromise. Or if I eat avocados, my immune system crashes, or my throat will actually literally close up and not allow me to eat anymore. So the more I kind of had those aha moments, the more I just like, this is legit. It's very well studied and documented, and I see it all day, every day, clinically in the office with patients.
That's amazing.
For your group, just to kind of give you a quick summary on the A blood type from an exercise perspective, and that comes into play. So the A blood type wants to do more kind of chill type exercise, more of the cardio and yogas and brain calming centering exercises, because they tend to be higher cortisol producers. Whereas, then the opposite of that functionally, exercise-wise, is the O blood type that needs to do more of the HIIT training or the more of the high-intensity training, because that is their de-stressor. That's going to help them be their best, ultimately. I'm a B blood type. I'm kind of right in the middle, so I need a lot of diversity. And, I talked about racing bikes. Even on my bikes, I do road riding one day, and I'll do, more intensity or structured training the next day, and then, go get lost in the hills on the mountain bike the next day. So just keep it variety, keeps me stimulated and functional.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Now I'm trying to think. I'm like, wait a minute. No, I think I'm an A negative.
Yeah.
I'm like, I probably shouldn't be doing kettlebells.
So just with the understanding, replicate. So, that's your happy place. So you use that understanding to balance or modulate it with proper cardio in between. Exactly. When I was a bodybuilder, I'm like, no cardio. I don't want to lose any muscle. It was this taboo.
That makes total sense. And so I think I actually still have, I wish it was on my shelf here. It's on my shelf over on the other side of my office. I still have that book. Is that the old kind of version of that book? Is there a better, like, if people were going to say, I want to dig into my blood type and do some reading about, the nutrition, whatever, is there a newer version or or newer writings just based on that?
Yes, he's come out with a couple other books since then. As an author, that is one of the best-selling health books of all time. So, it stood the test of time. Yeah, right.
I have it, yeah.
And, most people look at it like, I'm an A blood type. I can't give up beef, and then it gets put on the shelf and forgotten about. So, yes. Funny. So the blood type is the easiest, the blood type book was kind of the easiest to implement, and it's been around forever. He does have an app, the blood type diet app, that way you've got it with you. So you go out to sushi or something, you can look up the fish and see which one works for you, that kind of stuff. Helps with the journey, because it is a journey. It's not it'd be nice if it was an accomplishment. Like, okay, I figured it out. I've got to perfect it, but I've been doing it 20 some odd, almost 25 years, and still realizing, oops, that doesn't work for me, or that does.
No, I think, the more that we can play with the fact or understand the fact that health is a journey, just like life.
Right.
And again, even kind of coming back to just diet, we see all these diets. And if one diet worked for everybody, there would only be one.
Right.
Right? It would be pretty simple. And that's why some people, again, just your example, some people thrive on, paleo diet. Some people thrive on a different diet, right? And so it's a matter of their makeup and their bioindividuality that comes down to, which is, I think a lot of people overlook that. So I think that's interesting to kind of come back around to. And that book's been around forever. Yeah. So let's dive into and get a little, I think we've got some kind of tidbits from your book, but some of the other things that was part of the research that really intrigued you in creating that book.
Yeah, well, just the fact that the information is not out there and headaches can be treatable. Just being able to help people identify, hey, now the ball's in your court. If you eat tomatoes again, you're likely going to have another headache, or help people understand that so that doctor is teacher, right? We need to help people understand what the consequences or the triggers are. So that's the book is all about, trying to give people the tools, the resources to figure those out, or if they need a supplement, try to create simple links to get those supplements, that kind of stuff. It's not about the supplements, it's about the solution ultimately. Exactly. So examples of, neck extensors, I figured that out through applied kinesiology. I wrote a paper about how structural correlations cause these bilateral weaknesses like that back in the 90s myself. But they all have triggers. They all have root causes, whether that's nutrition or emotion or supplemental deficiency. Yeah, we all know our food supply these days is not the greatest.
Unfortunately, yes.
We have to dance around that aspect and do the best we can with what we have available. Make good choices. Just on that tidbit, organic vegetables tend to have thousands times the amount of minerals in them. So, if they keep going back to the right side of headaches, we were supposed to talk about thyroid and extension, but I mean, glyphosate, for example, the pesticide that they're using to kill, wheat, corn, soy, oats before they harvest it, that mucks up the gallbladder and inhibits bile production. So that's a big trigger for headaches, much again like the wheat would cause the tension headaches and inhibit the thyroid. So when we can identify those, and I try to lay it out if we can in the book to help people figure it out without having to physically be in my office.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what about, I'm curious, the example that you gave with regards to the tomatoes causing that right side headache. If they're avoided, someone decides to indulge.
Right.
Do you think that the fact that they've been away from them for so long, the headache onset the pain would be worse? Or does the accumulation of the exposure increase the pain?
Great question. Well worded. Yeah. So, I mean, typical response I hear as I get people into the blood type or, into eating properly, I'm so sensitive now. It's like, now you're aware, you were living at that 70% before. Now you're at 100%. You realize, hey, this sucks. Yeah. Right. So there's that new epiphany, that aha of like, oh, this is the consequence when I eat this. I talked about, I'd try to, if I forget to say no avocado on my sushi or something, I have trouble communicating, throat closing up, sinuses. So when we understand those, then we can make better, healthier choices. And then understanding, in that tomato example, sometimes we can eat a beet-based product, or beet leaf juice thins the bile. So sometimes we can do antidotes to compensate for, oops, I'm stuck at my grandkids, celebration, and this is the only food available. Yep. Then they can go home and take a okra pepsin, for example, as a herb that will unlock the negative effects of those lectins, for example. Mm-hmm. Or if we know that it's, going to be a right-sided headache problem, then we look at beet-based products that will help thin the bile and help that function. Or even if they don't have a gallbladder, maybe it's a bile product replacement. Often that can function as an antidote to give them grace for those indiscretions, right?
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I never thought about that, but that's really true. And yeah, I think, and it's interesting because if you think about it from even, thinking about a percentage or a mathematical perspective, chances are they're not even as low as they were before at 70%. They're probably at about 90, but they feel the difference because they're used to being at 100 now.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So that 10% is huge.
Yes.
When you put it in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
I
don't like feeling 99%.
right. No, it's, you notice, you're just like, I'm off, or, right. You notice right away when you become aware. And I think that go through this with, when you're replacing nutrients too, because it's like people are like, well, I have more symptoms now. Like, that's because you're noticing them.
Right.
Right. A lot of times people are kind of blindly going through and they're like, oh, it's fine. I'm just, getting whatever old, and then they're like, wait a minute. I do have a lot of symptoms and now I notice all of them. Right.
Yeah.
So I always find that super interesting too, as people, their awareness kind of heightens, then everything starts to change and they just become really observant for themselves, which is amazing.
Right.
It just allows them to end up feeling better and better.
And we should probably bring it around to the finish on an optimistic side, right?
100%.
When we eat the highly beneficials, then it's a cell surface marking that we're talking about with this blood or immune type. Yep. So if we eat a lot of the highly beneficials, that's a way to kind of leave nowhere for those adverse effects of the avoids. Avoids is what he calls them. To bind up. So when we're eating, you're well in the minerals, when we're eating a lot of the organic vegetables, then we're saturating the cells with those healthy minerals. So there's nowhere for the toxic minerals to bind up and cause consequences. Yep. So as we bring our level, our vibration, our energy up to, that 100, then we're saturating our cells with nutrients that it needs. And so there's less potential for consequence as well. So that's the optimistic side of it's not all about stop doing this, stop doing, but as you make better choices, you have better resilience.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that so many people, when they realize that they don't feel as well as they should, right? I think that once they do, it becomes such a habit because they want to feel that way all the time. And
right. It's addictive.
Exactly. And I also think that there's a huge kind of percentage of people too, when they enter their 50s and 60s. And I feel like, the expectation is, well, my health is going to decline. I'm in my 50s. Now,
yep.
What are you talking about? Right? I'm the total opposite. I'm like, 50's the new 40. Like, let's backtrack here and put things in perspective. Right. Yeah. And so I think that, as they start to kind of change things and feel better, I think that makes a huge impact because, you're right. It's addictive because it's like, wow, I didn't know I could feel this way. And, and realize that age is just a number.
It is, right?
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's about, I call it the wisdom number. It's just a number to tell you how wise you are.
Indeed. I like that.
Right?
Can I use that too?
You totally can use that. I will leave that out there for you. You can use that whatever you want because I love that analysis. I'm like, no, I just have 50 wisdom years under my belt. It means nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay, so book is coming. It's in editing. That's amazing. So we're right. So kind of like mid 2024, and you're going to be doing a tour, which is amazing.
Yes, you've helped me start that tour right now.
Perfect. I love it. And so we're going to have all the links for Dr. V in the description, whether you're on your favorite podcast channel or on YouTube. Yeah. And you can also head now to www.headacheadvantage.com. And right now you have a waiting list going there, right? So that people can sign up for the mailing list to be able to put on the list so that when the book launches, they'll be the first ones to be notified.
First of the line.
Love it. Okay.
It's all those headaches.
I love it. So headacheadvantage.com. Again, we'll have that website with a clickable link in the description.
Thank you.
And so Dr. V, I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today.
What a pleasure. It's been awesome. It's been wonderful.
This has been so good. And so many, I want to summarize because there's so many amazing things. So 7 distinct patterns for headaches. If you're having headaches, you got to look deeper. You got to look deeper into the body, right? And just kind of think of the things that were talked about today. Look at the blood type diet, right? Tens of thousands of people made changes in the issues with their diet to be able to fix these problems, right? And also think about how you're handling your lifestyle, your emotions on top of that, right? Think about your structural issues. If you've got anything that's kind of tight or not strong, that could be contributing to some of these things too. So lots of things to consider in order to become a healthier you or help your clients.
Right.
Right? All right. So if you're watching on YouTube, we have a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast every 2 weeks. Make sure you follow my channel and give this episode a like. If you're listening on your favorite podcast host, we thank you, of course. Give this episode a like, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us today on the Human Optimization Podcast. Episode technical production is by Grace Sylvester and guest booking by Stu Tate. Want to learn more? Visit Pitel-Killah.com for incredible free resources to supercharge your journey to becoming the best version of you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to the Human Optimization Podcast and follow me on social media at Pitel-Killah.